Have you ever noticed how truly intelligent older people speak differently? It's not just about having a bigger vocabulary or sounding more polished. It's something deeper. There's a calm precision to their words, a thoughtful silence between sentences, and above all, a conscious choice to avoid certain common phrases, ones that most of us say without thinking. But once you learn what those phrases are and why the wisest elders avoid them, you'll start to understand the mindset that sets them apart. In fact, these aren't just speech habits. They are reflections of how someone sees the world, how they respond to pain, and how they carry themselves with dignity even when life feels fragile. And interestingly, each one of these avoided phrases ties back to the principles of ancient Stoic philosophy, a way of thinking that reminds us that peace, resilience, and clarity don't come from our circumstances, but from how we choose to respond to them. If you're over 60, or even just starting to reflect more than react, this matters. Because staying mentally strong in your later years isn't about doubling down on what you've always done. It's about refining how you see yourself and how you express that self to the world. By the time you finish reading this, you might realize that simply changing a few phrases you use every day could quietly transform how others perceive you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Let's start with the first phrase intelligent older people rarely, if ever, say, "That's just how I am." At first glance, it sounds like confidence, like someone who knows themselves. But in reality, it often masks something else: resistance to growth. The smartest elders understand that aging isn't about locking in your personality and refusing to budge. It's about remaining open, evolving, and meeting new moments with fresh perspective. When someone says, "That's just how I am," what they're often doing is closing a door to learning, to deeper relationships, and to self-awareness. Stoic philosophy teaches that we're not fixed. Our character, our habits, our thinking, these are all within our control. The Stoics remind us, we become what we repeatedly choose. So saying, "That's just how I am," is like giving away your power, pretending you have no say in the kind of person you're becoming. True wisdom lies in saying, "I can be better, I can grow." Take Henry, a retired math teacher in his late 70s. He was known for his sharp tongue and perfectionism. For years, he brushed off criticism by saying, "That's just how I am." But over time, he noticed his grandchildren stopped asking him for help with homework. The warmth at family dinners faded. One night, sitting in silence as everyone stared at their plates, it hit him. Did he want to be right, or did he want to be remembered with love? That realization sparked change. He softened his tone, asked more questions, and slowly, his relationships blossomed again. That's the power of dropping a phrase and picking up growth instead. Now let's move to the second phrase. "It's too late for me." Few sentences carry more quiet sadness than this one. It slips out gently, but it echoes loudly in the heart. Intelligent, older adults almost never say these words, not because they haven't known grief or failure, but because they deeply understand one timeless truth. As long as you're breathing, you're not done. The Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, taught that we should live every moment as if it could be our last, but not out of fear, out of purpose. Saying "it's too late" is like placing a period where there should be a comma. Life might change, slow down, or shift direction, but it never truly runs out of meaning unless we decide it does. I once met a woman named Ruth, now 81, who spent most of her life as a homemaker. After her husband passed away, she felt hollow. "It's too late for me," she said. "Too late to travel, too late to start something new." But one day, after watching a painting tutorial online, she picked up an old set of watercolors. Slowly, day by day, she started painting again, first flowers, then landscapes, then portraits of her grandchildren. Within a year, her work was featured in a local art exhibit. The spark returned to her eyes. She wasn't trying to go back in time. She was simply refusing to give up on possibility. And that's the thread running through all these phrases the wisest elders avoid. They understand that how you speak shapes how you think, and how you think shapes how you live. The most intelligent older people don't pretend life is easy. They just speak in ways that keep them open to growth, connection, and grace. They choose words that reflect strength, not surrender. They trade comfort for character and pride for progress. And in doing so, they don't just age, they evolve. But one morning, that very afternoon, she walked to the local park, camera in hand, and began snapping photos of birds perched on fence posts. sunlight filtering through tree branches, the quiet beauty of cracked sidewalks. A year later, her work was featured in a neighborhood art show. 2 years after that, she sold her first photograph. Today, at 81, she teaches photography to other seniors every Thursday at her community center. Ruth didn't say, "It's too late for me." She asked herself a far more powerful question: why not now? That shift from resignation to curiosity is what intelligent aging looks like. It's not about pretending you're still 25. It's about reclaiming the value of your time, your wisdom, your creativity. The Stoics never believed in wasted years. They believed in the profound potential of the present moment, no matter how many moments you've already lived. It's too late is just fear wearing the mask of certainty, but real intelligence stares that fear down and says, "I'm still here. And while I'm here, I still matter." So the next time that voice whispers, "It's too late," answer it like a Stoic would, not with despair, but with quiet defiance and meaningful action. Say, "Watch me." If you're still reading this and finding these truths valuable, take a moment to reflect or comment below, because it means you're still choosing growth. Now, let's move forward. The third phrase intelligent elders don't use is "I can't change." It might sound like self-acceptance, but more often, it's silent surrender. It draws a boundary not because change is impossible, but because hope feels too vulnerable. Yet wise older adults, especially those grounded in Stoic thinking, reject this phrase not because change is easy, but because they know it is always possible. The Stoics believed our true power lies not in controlling others or circumstances, but in choosing our response. Epictetus said it clearly: "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." And how we respond, our thoughts, actions, habits, those are always within reach, even at 80. When you say, "I can't change," you surrender your power. But when you say, "I choose who I become," you take it back. Yes, change is uncomfortable. It asks us to confront the familiar, to loosen old patterns, and to risk discomfort. But does aging make this impossible? No. In fact, it gives us something rare: clarity of purpose. At 78, Walter was known for his short temper. For decades, he justified it by saying, "That's just how I am." But one day, when his young grandson flinched at a sudden outburst, something cracked open inside him. He didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be remembered with warmth. Walter began studying mindfulness, practicing stillness, and slowly, over weeks and months, his relationship softened. He apologized. He listened. He transformed. Not because he had to, but because he finally believed he could. "I can't change" is like closing a door that's still wide open. It's not truth, it's a feeling. And feelings pass. Wisdom comes from knowing the difference. Intelligent elders recognize that growth doesn't expire. In fact, it becomes more honest with age, more beautiful. Because by then, you've made enough mistakes to know what matters, and you've lived long enough to cherish the chance to become better while you still can. So the next time the words, "I can't change," rise to your lips, ask yourself instead, what small step can I take today? The answer may be the beginning of a more peaceful chapter. Now we arrive at the fourth phrase: "I deserve better than this." At first glance, it sounds like a declaration of self-respect, but when spoken with resentment, it becomes something far less empowering. It shifts the focus outward, framing us as victims rather than active authors of our lives. That's exactly why the wisest elders avoid it. Stoic philosophy teaches that we can't always control what life hands us, but we can control how we meet it. Saying, "I deserve better," when life is hard can anchor us in bitterness, not in strength. Life isn't always fair, and expecting fairness from it can create more suffering than the unfairness itself. Instead of demanding more from life, intelligent elders quietly ask more from themselves. They adjust expectations, seek meaning in adversity, and cultivate dignity regardless of outcome. That doesn't mean settling for mistreatment or injustice. It means facing hardship without letting it define your self-worth. There's a difference between fighting for a better life and being consumed by the idea that life owes you one. The former inspires change. The latter breeds resentment. The wisest elders carry themselves with a kind of quiet resilience, not because everything has gone their way, but because they've stopped needing it to. They no longer look outward for validation. They look inward for peace. Because at the heart of Stoic wisdom is this unshakable truth: your value doesn't come from what you get, but from who you choose to be in the face of what you're given. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire while enduring personal tragedy and relentless pressure, once wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny." For what could more aptly fit your needs? This wasn't a resignation to suffering, nor a suggestion that we passively accept injustice. It was a powerful reminder that clinging to ideas of fairness or what we think we're owed can quietly erode our resilience. When someone says, "I deserve better than this," they're not always being arrogant. They're usually hurt, tired, maybe heartbroken. They gave their best to something they believed in: a career, a relationship, a dream, and it didn't turn out the way they hoped. And that pain is real. But intelligent elders, especially those who live by the quiet strength of Stoic philosophy, understand that self-worth can't be chained to outcomes. They don't measure their dignity by success or comfort, but by how they respond when life falls short. They focus not on what they were given, but on how they gave. They don't need the world to applaud in order to stand tall. There's a man I know named Larry, now 81, who spent decades building a small family business with his bare hands. At 70, he proudly handed it over to his son, thinking he was securing a legacy. But within a few years, mismanagement ran it into the ground. Larry lost everything: his savings, his home, even his reputation in the community. For months, he sank into bitterness, repeating over and over, "I gave my whole life to that, and this is what I get." But after sitting with the grief, talking with a few old friends, and rereading his own journals, something shifted. He began mentoring young entrepreneurs at a local library. He didn't do it to prove a point. He did it because, deep down, he still believed in building. He stopped waiting for life to make it up to him and started living as if his time still mattered. And in doing so, he found a peace deeper than vindication. The Stoics would say that life is not a transaction. You don't earn an easy life because you worked hard or applause because you tried. What you earn is the strength of your character, the clarity of your choices, and the wisdom that comes from showing up with virtue, even when life lets you down. So the next time you're tempted to say, "I deserve better," pause and ask instead, "What can I grow from this? What strength can I uncover here?" Because Stoic intelligence doesn't avoid pain, it transforms it into something noble. And now we come to the final phrase, "That's just how I am." On the surface, it seems harmless, even honest. But in truth, it's one of the most quietly dangerous sentences we can speak. It sounds like acceptance, but it often signals something else entirely: a decision to stop evolving. Intelligent older people, especially those rooted in Stoic thought, understand that the moment you stop reflecting, learning, or adjusting, you begin to shrink. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus believed that character isn't fixed. It's shaped moment by moment, choice by choice. Personality isn't a wall, it's a garden, one that needs attention, pruning, and care throughout every season of life. So when someone says, "That's just how I am," they're not describing who they are. They're announcing that they've stopped trying to become better. And that's not aging, it's stagnation. The temptation is strong in later years to settle into patterns, to feel like the hard lessons are behind us and there's no more growing left to do. But Stoic wisdom says otherwise. As long as you're alive, you are still becoming. Not becoming someone entirely new, but becoming more of who you truly are. More present, more thoughtful, more courageous, more compassionate. I think of Carol, a 78-year-old retired schoolteacher who had always described herself as not a people person. She'd skip gatherings, avoid long conversations, and lived most of her retirement in quiet isolation. It had become her identity. But after a brief health scare and time spent recovering alone, she found herself surrounded not by peace, but by silence. For the first time, she felt the weight of disconnection. Instead of repeating, "That's just how I am," she tried something new. She joined a small monthly book club at her local library. Slowly, she began opening up. She shared stories, laughed, even cried. The woman who thought she had nothing to say discovered she had a lifetime's worth of wisdom others wanted to hear. She hadn't changed into a social butterfly overnight, but she had softened, expanded. She had grown. Intelligent elders understand that old patterns aren't prisons. They're just habits, and habits can be reshaped. Saying, "That's just how I am," is like closing the book before the final chapters are written. But those final chapters, They matter the most. That's where your wisdom gets expressed. That's where your legacy is shaped. And there's another quiet danger. If you've grown distant, you can reconnect. Because aging isn't an ending, it's an invitation to soften, to sharpen, to go deeper, to live truer. The Stoics taught that character is everything. That virtue is the only true legacy. And that the best version of yourself is never behind you. It's still ahead, waiting patiently for you to choose it. The person you were yesterday doesn't have to be the person you wake up as tomorrow. That's the quiet beauty of life. It always offers the opportunity to begin again. So instead of saying, "That's just how I am," try saying, "That's what I've done in the past, but I'm open to better." That subtle shift in language opens a door. And as the Stoics have long taught, wisdom begins when we learn to notice the doors that lead to better character and choose to walk through them. There's strength in consistency, yes, but there's deeper wisdom in choosing to evolve. And that's what separates the truly intelligent from those who simply grow old. Now, let's explore phrase number 6. I deserve more. On the surface, it can sound like self-respect, but beneath it often lies frustration and a creeping sense of entitlement. The moment we start thinking in terms of what we deserve, we can accidentally shift from gratitude to grievance, and intelligent older adults, especially those grounded in Stoic philosophy, are careful with this distinction. They know that while it's healthy to know your worth, it's dangerous to expect the world to validate it in specific ways. Life isn't a transaction. It's not a reward system. It's a gift, messy, unpredictable, sometimes painful, often beautiful. And the minute we start demanding returns for our efforts, we begin to invite bitterness. Take Paul, a retired business owner now in his 80s. He spent over 40 years building a company from the ground up. When his adult children showed no interest in taking it over, he felt wounded, muttering often, "After all I've done, I deserve a little more appreciation." That mindset didn't bring him closer to them, it drove a wedge. He began tallying all he'd given, all he hadn't received. But one day, over coffee with an old friend, he had a moment of clarity. What if, instead of clinging to what he thought he was owed, he asked, "What can I offer now?" That one mental shift changed everything. He stopped trying to pass down a business and started passing down wisdom. Stories, kindness, a legacy not of control, but of care. And his children responded, not out of guilt, but with warmth. When you approach life with entitlement, you're always measuring who got what, who owes you what, and how much you've been shortchanged. It's exhausting. But when you shift into a posture of contribution, of presence, of acceptance, life feels lighter. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius never expected fairness from the universe. Instead, they asked, "How can I live with integrity no matter what happens?" That question leads to freedom, a kind of freedom that doesn't depend on applause, recognition, or reward. Intelligent elders live this way not because they've given up on justice, but because they've grown beyond needing the world to constantly affirm their worth. I deserve more is a trap, not because it's wrong to value yourself, but because it places your emotional well-being in someone else's hands, your family, the government, your past self. But peace doesn't come from fairness. It comes from perspective. From recognizing that even what you have today, the breath in your lungs, the chance to speak, to notice beauty, to love, is already more than enough. Which brings us to a powerful truth worth repeating. The words we choose shape the way we experience life. And nowhere is that more important than in later life, when the spotlight of the world often dims, but the richness of inner life can grow brighter than ever. There comes a point, often after 70, when the question stops being, "What should I do next?" and becomes, "How do I live well with what I have now?" And in that space, your words matter more than ever. They are no longer just communication tools, they are the mirrors through which you see yourself. That's why the most thoughtful, resilient, intelligent older people avoid phrases like "it's too late," "I can't change," "I deserve more," or "that's just how I am." Not because they're trying to sound wise, but because they've learned, through experience and pain, that peace is a perspective, and words can either set us free or quietly imprison us. A Stoic elder isn't numb to life. They aren't hardened or closed off. Quite the opposite. They feel more deeply than most. They love more fully, but they've learned how to hold things lightly. They know how to choose their response, even in the middle of sorrow. They don't say, "Nobody listens to me," they become better listeners. They don't say, "It's not fair," They focus on what they can still influence. That's real strength, not the kind that shouts, the kind that steadies, the kind that walks forward with dignity, even when the path is uncertain. Because the truth is, your words shape your days, and your days shape your soul. And your soul, your quiet inner spirit, is what carries you through life's final chapters. So choose words that build you up, that open doors, that reflect not just who you were, but who you're still becoming. Because as long as you're breathing, there is still beauty waiting to unfold. There is still someone you can encourage, something you can learn, something meaningful you can give. Thank you for being here. If something in this resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment below and share one insight you're taking with you today. Your reflections don't just encourage us, they inspire others who read them. And if you found this message meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue creating thoughtful, soul-strengthening content for you and others. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and above all, stay open to becoming.